Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Product School webinar. Thanks for joining us today. Just in case you didn't know, Product School teaches product management, product leadership, coding, data analytics, digital marketing, and UX design courses online and at our 16 campuses worldwide. On top of that, every week we offer some amazing local product management events and host online webinars, live streams, and Ask Me Anything sessions. Head over to productschool.com after this webinar to check them out. Today, we have an awesome guest presenting. I'd like to introduce you to Kenyan Manu. Kenyan is a data-driven product manager with a deep understanding of SEO and an extensive background in marketing. He has a full-stack development certification, studied web design, and has a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration, Management, and Operations. Previously, Kenyan has worked as an SEO product manager at Amazon, Overstock, and T-Mobile. Today, he is a senior SEO product manager at Carvana and an instructor at Product School. Feel free to leave any questions for Kenyan in the comments, and I'll ask him them at the end. And without further ado, let's welcome Kenyan. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thank you. I'll share my screen. Happy to be here and speaking with everybody. Pull this up.
Looks good.
Sweet. So as mentioned, I will be discussing how we go about building an SEO product roadmap. And a few assumptions here is that if you're going to be doing SEO as a product, you're going to be doing probably mid to even enterprise SEO. So if you're unfamiliar with that, I have another talk about enterprise SEO. You can see in the links if you follow, and you'll be able to see previous talks that goes a little bit more introductory stuff. And so we're going to be starting here with kind of, okay, we've established what enterprise SEO is. Now, how do we get in here and kind of build a roadmap to guide the channel? So if we can click this to, there we go. So first of all, we're going over like how to build this SEO product roadmap, kind of a framework for using that, why you need to build a really solid roadmap, and how you can make
interrupt you. I think your screen share stopped. I don't see your screen share anymore.
Let me come through. We back?
Yep, now it's back.
Okay. Sorry about that.
And yeah, looks good.
There we go. Also be touching on click-through curve projections. I think building the roadmap for SEO is pretty standard frameworks that you'd see for most product management or project management stuff. Where it gets a little bit different for SEO is something called click-through curve projections. And so I'll be going over those, as well as going over kind of what we call a standard SEO testing framework. SEO testing is a lot different than standard user testing you would do when you're releasing a product, so we'll go over that. And then we'll kind of talk about how you want to report your successes and failures in when you're doing SEO as product. A little bit different than traditional stuff again, so we'll touch bases on all of those. First of all is, 1 year a PM, and this goes for, SEO and just general PMs. You've been given these resources, and the intent is like, okay, you have engineers, you probably have an analyst, you probably have UX person, whether that's shared resource or dedicated to your team. You've been given a set of resources, and the intent is that you're going to bring a return on investment on the resource investment. And it's usually a considerable amount of money. I think the average G&A costs, or probably the lower end of a G&A cost for a full engineering team, is going to be about $1 million a year. So if you're stepping into a product role, it's safe to assume, like this varies depending on the size of your team and how many shared resources you have, but it's safe to assume it's about like $1 million a year investment in G&A. And I think that's even probably on the lower, more conservative side. So you're stepping into a situation where someone said, like, we trust you enough, here's $1 million worth of resources. What return are you going to bring back on that resource investment? And SEO, unlike a lot of other channels, is essentially a black box, meaning that you're not able to see Google's algorithm. They don't identify every single factor that's in there. There's actually hundreds if not thousands of factors that go into their algorithm that determines what's shown in the search engine results page. So we don't have a solid framework or way to clearly say, like, if I do X, I'm going to get Y, and have something to kind of say, like, we know this because of this. So what it means is that you're essentially placing bets. One of my mentors and my old boss at Amazon said, you know, running SEO is like placing bets, and you're basically betting on what you think is going to give you the best return, like you might, or what you think is going to give you the best return on your investment. So it's almost like people get a little bit nervous when I make that analogy, because it's like, oh, that seems crazy. There's a lot of risk involved. Absolutely, there's a ton of risk involved. And so why I think building the product roadmap is important is because it's a very good way for you to mitigate the risk on the bets that you're placing. Gives you a way to make sure that you're efficiently placing bets, and it gives you a framework that you can test and vet and make sure that you're doing things properly. And it also provides kind of a feedback loop for saying, okay, I bet this stack of green chips that this project was going to release and get executed and bring this amount of results. And you can check against that, and then you can say, like, actually it returned what we thought it would, but the way that we measured it, or our assumptions up front, or projections, were a little bit off. So we're going to make an adjustment going forward. That's a very key part, is that when you're doing these roadmaps and you're having these projections and then you execute and you measure them, is that it should be a feedback loop that continually lets you know, my projections are, too big, too small, or the way that I'm setting up the testing is accurate or inaccurate. So it's a very good way to be able to kind of start off with a baseline, make some estimates, execute some stuff, build some confidence, and then check against those results and put that into basically a feedback loop of how you're building your roadmap, building out your projections, and reporting, doing your tests, and then eventually reporting on those results. So without further ado, we'll get into Clickstream Curve. Excuse me. There we go. Before we jump into Clickstream Curve, we'll go into kind of like how you start off building this product framework. So, or excuse me, how you build this backlog and this prioritization list. So SEO, just like basic any other product that you might be managing, you're going to have a long list of stuff. Given an unlimited amount of time, unlimited amount of resource, we're going to go do everything that we think is important. We know that's not how it actually works out in the real world. You have a very limited amount of time, and you have an even more limited amount of resources. So in order to make sure that you're running your program or product most efficiently, you need some kind of a framework so you can back into making sure that the most important things, the most valuable things, get done first and are out first. Maybe in a later talk or something else, I might, if I have time at the end, I'll touch on order of in SEO. That's another level you could layer on top of this to make sure you do things right. But for the purposes of this talk, and we'll start here with making sure that we find what's most important to do first, and then assigning that a priority. So if you look at this feature and product backlog prioritization matrix, it's a matrix, but you could also imagine this to be a graph where you have customer value on the x-axis and your cost or your effort or risk on your y-axis. And basically what you would do, an exercise that I go through when I do this, is with myself, the dev lead, the engineers, other analysts, other people that might be on the team, strategists, whoever it is that's on your SEO team. It probably shouldn't be just you. By the time you make these estimates and then you haven't had your engineers or your engineering leads input, you'll find that you probably under or overestimated cost and risk to develop. So it's really key and critical that you get their input on this before you go into this process, or at least before you finalize it. So what you're going to see here is that you have cost risk starting from low and going to high. Same thing with customer value. And the whole idea here is that you will, process I usually go, and I think this is good to have this as a group process, and having this as an X and Y axis, is it allows you to put things in a position of and get the group's opinion on what we think is the most valuable and what we think is the most complex to execute on. And putting that in a chart allows you to view all of your projects relative to each other. So one project might seem like it's extremely risky to do, or is extremely valuable. And then when you place another project on this chart, this prioritization matrix, which could also be a chart, you're able to see like the relative complexity and the relative value to each other, which I believe, and in my experience, has helped me really hone in on what the actual effort and what the actual impact is. And then having your engineers there and other people like analysts, or if you have strategists or people of that nature, you can get input to kind of talk through what we think the perceived customer value is, or the business impact. And we'll go into that a little bit more when we go through the click-through curve projections. But suffice it to say that having this matrix and or chart is a really good way for you to look at kind of talking through and summarizing, so you make sure that you get your highest priority items done first. So if you look at the first one, which is feature one, you can see like that's the stuff that, excuse me, if you go through feature one, you see in that box like those are the things that are high risk to develop and low customer value. So you have to kind of look at that and say, what should I be building here? Probably if it's low customer value and it's high risk to develop, I'm going to shy away from that kind of stuff. If I looked at my box number 4 and I see customer value, this is a high value item and it has a low cost or risk to develop, that's the stuff you want to prioritize first. So I wanted to kind of talk through that first so you can get an idea of like what that chart can look like. I've seen these axes inverted. It really doesn't matter as long as you basically are able to identify what is the highest customer value with the lowest risk or effort to develop and execute on. And then another thing that I'll do after we do that, or it can even be before, it doesn't really matter which order they come, but make sure you have just a spreadsheet in front of you or in front of the group, and you're able to assign scores. And same thing goes through this that I said about the chart, about that relative value and having these things next to each other, is you can actually estimate, okay, effort is a 3. Do we all agree on that? Yes. Impact's a 3. Do we all agree on that? Yes. And kind of go through that. And again, gauging that relative impact and effort is really helpful when you're going through this exercise. And one thing to note when you're looking at the sample blended prioritization framework where the actual scores are there is that will actually kick out your score for each project and or test. And then you have your priority set, you're ready to go. Another important thing to look at when you're looking at this is you might be a little bit confused and saying like effort is a 3. Shouldn't a high effort have a low score? It's the effort thing is inverted, so that a low effort actually has a high effort score. So this test 1 has the lowest effort, even though its score is highest. And it's just set up that way so that it's easy to see the score when it comes through. That has the highest score because it has the lowest effort and the highest impact. So that's kind of how those numbers are set up and how it's structured. Click-through curve projections. So this is kind of how we get into the meat of like how you're going to actually make accurate projections and determine what the projected impact is. And so I'll give you a little bit of background on click-through curve and kind of keyword tags and how that's set up and how we kind of view that. And at a very high level, this is a heuristic. It is not an exact science, but again, this should be a feedback loop so that as you kind of make these projections, you're adapting your click-through curve. We'll go into what that is based on your own business model and your industry, and you're making that more accurate over time. So again, this is a baseline, and its accuracy if you're doing it correctly, your accuracy will improve over time. So to start with the keyword tags, you probably know by now that in SEO we track keywords usually based on a keyword tag structure, and not to say that we don't. Like keyword tags and rankings are the end all be all. Traffic and a whole bunch of other KPIs are extremely important, and keyword and ranking should not be any well-rounded SEO's final and last KPI set, but they are very important, and they're especially useful when doing projections on a project basis. And the reason for that is that you can have keyword tags, or you should have keyword tags arranged in a hierarchy that really allows you to slice and dice your performance and understand how things are performing on a large to a very granular level. So for example, a company like eBay might have a keyword tag. This is just one keyword tag tree structure, one keyword tag in a tree that has many of these. One of them might look like electronics, cell phones, iPhones X. Each of these would be a keyword tag. So electronics would be its own keyword tag. iPhone X would be its own keyword tag. And it's in a hierarchical manner, meaning that the child will be represented in its fullness up to the parent. So what that means is that iPhone X, all the keywords in that keyword tag will also be rolled up into the iPhone's keyword tag, which is rolled up into cell phones, which is rolled up into electronics. And in these tags, you have a sample set of your most important keywords for that category of the business. If you're a smaller site, you probably have all of your keywords in each tag. It really depends on like how big your keyword universe is. And again, the top level tag will have the keywords from all of its children tags. There's a lot of important metrics, but the ones we're going to look at right now are going to be average rank and weighted average rank. So if I have a keyword tag for iPhone X and I have 100 keywords in that tag, I'm going to look at the rank position for all of those keywords, and then I'm going to associate an average rank so I can get a quick idea of the overall health of that keyword tag. An even more granular metric is weighted average rank, which takes into account the keyword's search volume as well as its position. So in average rank, if I look at the rankings for a keyword that is number one and it has 10 searches a month, and then I look at a keyword that's number two and it has 1 million searches a month, that average is going to still come out regardless of the monthly search volume that's coming there. And so what weighted average rank does is it takes into account the search volume associated with that and gives it a higher weighting based on how many searches that keyword has. So it's a lot more accurate because keywords are not a one-to-one ranking, you can't have a one-to-one comparison based on position without considering what the associated search volume is, because a keyword that has a lot of search volume and it might be ranked number 4, but it has 1 million searches a month, is going to bring in a lot more traffic than a keyword that's ranked number 1 and has 100 searches a month. So weighted average rank is my preferred way to do that, but you'll see a lot of people doing average rank. So it's really up to you. I think weighted average rank is a little bit more granular, and there's some complexities involved with it, but I actually will do this for both of them and kind of look at the differences and make adjustments based on that. But again, that's up to you. If you want to start with average and then work your way up to weighted average rank, that's fine. The basis for this, for the data that we're seeing in these charts is, the first one is a click-through curve. And so what you'll see is, if we'll start with the blue line, the branded one, which says that for this, we'll assume, again, we'll stay with our example of iPhone X keywords. We'll assume this is for that keyword tag. So for this, and as you're moving across the line, things would change. So bear with me a little bit. If you look at this position number 1, it's telling me that at position number 1, I will get about 52% of all of the search volume. So, and imagine that you're able to change your average ranking for this iPhone X, keyword tag. So let's start at number 1, and we'll assume, just for ease of comparison, we'll assume that this keyword tag gets 100 searches a month. So if the keyword tag gets 100 searches a month at a position 1, I can expect that at 52%, I'll get 52 clicks per month. If that drops down to a position 2, looks like it's about 12%, I'm going to get 12 clicks a month. If it goes down to 3, it looks like it's about at a 6 or a 7 clicks that I would get a month, 4, so on and so on. You get the overall idea. The most important part here is that using a click-through curve, I can identify where my average ranking is, and then I can project what the incremental clicks I will get by moving that average or weighted average rank up from third page, second page, first page, up to position. Like, so if up through position. So just for example, like one of the business cases might be, I have iPhone X that has these keywords and it has 100 searches. 100 searches are happening representative of this keyword sample a month. It's incredibly small, but we're just using that number for ease of this example. So that average keyword rank is at position 5. And so I'm getting about, looks like, what is that, like 3 clicks a month. So I have this project that's going to solve a bunch of problems. We've identified a ton of issues with this specific page type and template, and we're going to fix all of those. And for whatever reason, this is a very aggressive estimation, but just for example purposes, again, we're going to project that this iPhone X keyword group is going to move from position 5 to position 1. So I'm going to go, if we execute and that actually happens, I go from getting, say it's 2 or 3 clicks a month to 52 clicks a month. So I have about 50 incremental clicks a month. And that's the basis of how we do this calculation using this click-through curve. Is you're basically identifying where your keyword tag, or this could be for your whole keyword set potentially. That's, some technical fixes, you might say something like that. You might say like, we're resolving this indexation issue or something like this that's causing our average rank to go down. You might apply this to a larger keyword set. It's the purpose. So the overall idea here is that you're identifying where your average rank is currently, and then you're identifying a set of actions or a project or a product that you think will move your rankings and estimated position amount, and then that gives you your incremental traffic value. So that's a really high level, quick and dirty way of doing click-through rate projections for your roadmap. It gets a little bit more complicated. I'm not going to jump into it too much because I think the most important part is that you do this on a feedback loop basis and you make adjustments as you see needed. For example, the second chart that you see here is the distribution of click-through curves. Your click-through curve is going to be unique to your website, meaning that, and it's going to change by branded, non-branded, a lot of other dimensions. So use kind of a generic click-through curve for your industry and then make adjustments to that as it goes on. If you are moving keywords, let's say that you're in the travel industry, as we see, like travel industry is projected to get 21% in the first position, that goes down to 16% for second and 9% for third position. If you're in the travel industry and you're getting different numbers, adjust your click-through curve to see what you're actually getting, and that will make this whole process a lot more accurate over time. Again, like this is kind of a baseline. It's a heuristic. It's not. You're estimating based on a black box. There's a lot of factors. So this is really something that you have to pay attention to over time, so that you're able to improve and really hone in on that accuracy. Now that you've created, now that you have a bunch of stuff that you've prioritized, you've gone through your prioritization. Everybody agrees. It makes total sense. We have this framework that's working. Great. Okay. Now comes the hard part. You have to execute that stuff. Okay. So you build it, and now you're ready to do testing, SEO testing. And this part, I can't stress how important this is, because all of the feedback loop and all of the stuff that we've been talking about really comes down to how accurately you test stuff, and you're able to like determine the real value that you got. You can't really say like, I projected it would raise traffic or rankings by X amount, and then run a test and it's unclear. So this part is really important for that feedback loop to really be kicking into hyperdrive and improving your accuracy and your projections over the long term. And we'll touch on why I think why that's important beyond the obvious reasons towards the end. So one of the things that SEO is different, one of the ways that SEO is different is you cannot do a traditional site test where you split your user groups, or you split your control and your variant group by users. The reason you can't do that is because you can't force all of Googlebot into one test or control group. So what will happen is Googlebot will see the changes that you applied to your animals page, like in the example below, but it won't see the changes and then it will also see the changes that you applied to your country, let me back up. If you put Google in a user split, like a traditional A/B test, it will end up seeing most likely both variants at a different amount of time, because Google will hit you from multiple bots, different IPs. They'll sometimes spoof an actual user. So what happens is you don't get a clean test because the Google bot is seeing both your control and your variant at different amounts of time over the timing of the test. So it's completely not valid. You can still do user testing before you do a traditional SEO test, and I usually do that and recommend that, just so you get an idea of conversion, so you can tell, like, is this hurting or improving conversion? Okay, it's not making a negative impact. Now we're ready to scale out to a larger SEO test. Okay, enough of that. What is the actual SEO test? Well, the difference between an SEO test and a traditional test is that you split your groups. Well, even before you split your groups, you group those groups based on your KPIs on a set of pages, not users. So if in this example, we're looking at animals versus countries, within those groups, you have to look at your animals group and your countries group and say, can we make a test and control group that correlate to each other on whatever that KPI is? So assuming that my animals and my countries correlate on traffic. Traffic's a good one to use because rankings are step changes. A lot of the times, like, even if you get into, so it just makes for much more difficult correlations to be done. So I like to use traffic. You can use a bunch of other stuff. Traffic is usually pretty clean and easy to do. And so you can based on identifying them on traffic, you can say, okay, this group of pages in my animal test group is highly correlated to this group of pages in my country's test control group based on those visits. And then what happens is, and you see in the chart below, is you have this intervention point or the test start date, and you're very sure that these two groups were performing almost near identically before that. And then you make this change, and then you can kind of see the variant group hopefully start to depart and go upward. That way you're very confident that what the changes that are happening are due to this intervention or this test. And then something that I even like to do after this, if we're looking at this chart on the bottom, you can kind of see this part where they start to split behind. What I'll do is I'll take a second step, and I will then introduce the changes on the control group and see if it moves similar to the variant group, just kind of like as a double confirmation to see that's what's really happening. Again, in SEO, things change all the time. We just had a Google algorithm update, was it Monday? And everything is in a large state of flux. So suffice it to say, like, you have to be very accurate with your testing to get a good idea of, like, what's successful and what's not, so that you can reliably say, say, this is what's working, this is what's not, and make adjustments as needed. Let's see if they'll let me over. And then lastly, you're going to want to go into reporting successes and failures. And this is really important for SEO, because you have to set expectations that you have to let people know, like, we're not 1,000% certain. We're not 100% certain in everything that we're doing. We're using these frameworks to approximate the best that we can, but this is not a sure science. You are testing against a black box algorithm, and there is a ton of uncertainty. So just make sure that you're honest and you're upfront and you're transparent about, I don't know everything. Nobody in SEO knows everything. The people that are successful are honest and upfront about that, and they're aggressively testing stuff and testing their assumptions and changing what they think works and testing it doesn't. You have to be extremely adaptable and be able to shift mind frames and paradigms very quickly. So be honest and be transparent with that, and say, like, and go set expectations in that before you even get to the point where you're reporting successes and failures. Just be very upfront and say, like, this is what we've prioritized, this is why we think it's going to be successful, and this is our method for testing, and once we have results, we'll share them out. What you'll see when you do this over time is that you'll build trust with your stakeholders. Your team will build trust, the organization will build trust. again, and this is very critical for SEO because again, it's a black box. You need to be able to establish a pattern of success, honesty, and transparency with your stakeholders in your organization, so that when you're spending that $1 million of engineering and UX and analytics resources, they have a reason to believe that you know what you're doing and you're going to deliver return on that investment. So again, it's extremely valuable that you are upfront with your wins as well as your losses. And one of the, like, I wanted to share one of my personal things that I thought was going to be a win, and it was not, and how I shared that, and why I think that was an important process. Back in, I want to say 2014 or 2015, you can, whenever it was that the iPhone 6 was released, I was sure that, or I wasn't sure, but I was very interested with the idea that gaining backlinks, which is a primary metric for SEO rankings, gaining backlinks would help boost our Black Friday page. Well, okay, yeah, duh, backlinks will boost your Black Friday page, but I was under the belief that not only the count of links that you had to a certain page would impact your ranking, but the propensity in which you gathered those links leading up to an event like Black Friday would also impact your ranking. So my thought was, all right, we're going to get a whole bunch of links to our Black Friday page right before Black Friday, and that's just going to boost our rankings through the roof. 1 or 2 positions is a huge win for Black Friday. So what we did is we gave away like 10 iPhone 6s, and we had this splash landing page that gathered emails and was social sharing links that allowed people to share these links to the Black Friday page. And tons of people enrolled, tons of people shared, tons of people left their emails. It was great. The impact to SEO from the links that we gained from that was, one, it was just inconclusive. A lot of the times in our backlink tools, it took too long for the links to show up. They crawl a lot slower than Google, so it took too long for the links to show up, so it's hard to measure. A site like Overstock had literally millions of links, so you might get a lot of links, but how big is that when you're looking at millions? It turns out to be not that big. We did gather a lot of emails, and we found that, like, okay, the email campaign had a really high return rate from people that had participated in the sweepstakes. So that was one plus, but the overall thing was inconclusive. So what I didn't do is send out an email and say, hey, we did this test and we ended up making up our return on investment from spend on the iPhones from creating this email campaign. I didn't lead with that. And the reason I didn't lead with that was because that was not as important to me as what we learned. What we learned is that, yeah, we do still think backlinks are possible and are important, and the propensity to gain backlinks are important, but the way in which we want to test things like this in the future has to be improved on for us to be able to do this. And the reason is that we have so many backlinks that being able to isolate like backlinks to a page like Black Friday is extremely difficult. And so what I did is provide, like, if we want to test this in the future, this is what we'll have to do. And here's different ways we can kind of isolate these, isolate 2 pages and have a control and test where we gather links from one and not. And so when I reported on that, I was like, yeah, we don't know. It was inconclusive. I was very upfront with that. The test didn't return any information either way that we could use in the future. I then mentioned that the email campaign was great, but the reason for that is you just need to be, when you're doing SEO, don't be afraid to share bad news. There will always be bad news. Hopefully there'll also be good news, but just get in the habit of being super transparent with your wins, your losses. What you'll see is that as you build confidence with your stakeholders and in your organization, it's going to be a lot easier to get projects approved. It's going to be easier to get resources. It's going to be easier for you just in general. And that comes with being accurate on your projections, executing on your roadmap, and reporting on everything very transparently. So that's kind of my summary on that. One last point I did want to mention at the bottom here is, if you're starting out on a project, you're new to SEO team, you're new to an organization, yeah, it's always good. Choose a project that you're highly confident that the team can execute and is also valuable for the business. That's a really good way to start building trust in your new team and your new program, whatever that is, so that you can get in, knock something out, demonstrate the value, and start building trust from that. What you don't want to do is take on a huge project, fail at it, and that's how you start. That might be what you have to do depending on the stage of your business. Like you might just need to jump into that really difficult, risky project. But if you do have the option, I would say choose something that's, you know, not tiny, but it is something you can be proud that you achieved, but it also has a business value, and then you can start building that trust. And that is it for me. I wanted to open this time up for Q&A. And so let me see if I stop my share. There we go.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that presentation. That was great. So one question, I do have a question here in the comments, but before that, we always like to ask our speakers, I mean, your presentation was packed full of insights, but if you had one piece of advice for an aspiring product manager, an advice or wisdom or a quote or something, what would that be?
I'll kind of go back to a reoccurring thing that I touched on is that one of my mentors told me was that I can't remember who told him this, but he said, you know, establish a framework and test against it. And that has just been extremely valuable for me is, you know, if you have a problem or you're proposing a solution, whatever it is, establish your framework and then test against that framework and improve. So one of the things that would be my piece of advice, and then look into the processes in which you do things and see which ones lend themselves to feedback loops. And you'll find that not only yourself, but the processes that you're doing will improve over time and you'll become a stronger PM.
Awesome. Thank you. One other question we have is, can you describe some of the tools you are using to do your SEO management and an emphasis on free or inexpensive tools?
Yes, I actually have a slide from my last presentation that I might pull up and run through real quick. If I can. Am I still sharing? Okay, you can.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, you can full screen that if you want.
Let's go here. Screen this. Let's see if this full screen wants to work. It probably doesn't want to all the way, but I'll just run through these super quick. Emphasis on free and cheap. So Google Analytics is free. The 361 is very expensive. So that's probably not one that you want. Google Analytics, excuse me, I'm clicking on the Google Chrome thing. Yes, Google Analytics, Google Chrome Dev Tools is free. Page Speed Insights is free. Page Speed Insights uses something called Lighthouse. Lighthouse for performance stuff is also free. That is an extremely powerful set of tools that you're going to get for absolutely free. So Dev Tools will let you inspect Element, let you see how your network connections, all of your timings, all that stuff is panning out like very, very granularly, so you can see that. Page Speed Insights will give you very good suggestions on how to improve your score. Lighthouse, or your page speed score. Lighthouse goes even more in depth than that, and you can see just tons of data. And I can't stress how important it is to make your pages fast for SEO and for user experience both. So those are very powerful tools. Lighthouse actually has started using real user data. So they're actually looking at how humans behave on your site and how quick that is. So again, super powerful. Google Search Console, also completely free and easy to set up. Like should take you, it's only like 5 or 10 minutes. Screaming Frog is not free, but it's relatively cheap for a tool. I think it's 149 pounds. So it's not crazy expensive. Looking at some of the rest of these, SEMrush has a very low cost. SEMrush is amazing, by the way. It has a very low cost plan. It's been a while since I have not been using their enterprise one, so I'm not sure what that is, but I'm pretty sure it's a pretty low starting point. And SEMrush provides a ton of keyword data. So it gives you keyword data and rankings and search estimates for yourself, for all your competitors. It's usually my starting point for doing any kind of competitive analysis. So that is extremely powerful, almost free, not free, but it's compared to a lot of other things, it's very cheap. And Screaming Frog will allow you to crawl your site, build in some site maps, your site, competitor sites, and gives you, lets you extract HTML. It's very powerful. So I'll also highly recommend that. As far as like free and cheap things go, those would be the ones that I would recommend off the top of my head. SEO Tools also has a really good set of tools that I believe is pretty inexpensive. That's about it off the top of my head. I apologize. It's been a while since I didn't have a reasonable budget to go out and buy the good tools. So if you hit me up on LinkedIn or something, I might be able to give you more stuff. But I would honestly start with the Chrome DevTools, Google Analytics, SEMrush, and Google Search Console. You will probably have more data with those than you'll know what to do with. But if you're looking for something specific, you want a good review of a cheap option, just hit me up on LinkedIn and I'll send you some stuff.
Awesome, thank you. So our last question here, what are some of the biggest challenges you are facing as a PM at Carvana this year?
Oh, that is a good question. So I think probably when I first got there, they were changing technologies. So they were moving, I'm trying to think how much of this I can disclose, but I think it's pretty open. They were changing technologies as far as the languages that we're using. And so I'll say that we had a stack, we changed to a different stack. Changing to that different stack enabled us to do a lot of more SEO friendly stuff, specifically isomorphic stuff with React and Node, which would allow you to manage stuff on the client and the server and these methods called hydration. I won't get too far into it. That was a big shift for the organization in general, like even without any SEO stuff. So switching over from kind of this paradigm where mostly everything is done on the client, which is essentially invisible to search engines, to saying like, okay, all of this important information needs to be available on the server. It sounds like a small task. It's not small, and it can be pretty complicated. So I think that was pretty difficult. We also had in that switchover, we also did changing of the URL structure, which required redirects, which we discovered there was more. The mapping of the redirects was not one-to-one. It ended up being many-to-one, like many different URL structures to one, which was incredibly difficult. We got through all of that stuff, and things are going well. A few days ago, we had an algorithm update. That's always a challenge. We've had numerous Google errors this year, which is the first time I've ever seen that. So I would say probably challenges have been moving things to server side, doing a large group of redirects, and then errors from Google and updates have been difficult. And I would say like that is also stuff that's pretty on par for what you'll do enterprise SEO anywhere. There's a lot of people that struggle. I haven't seen an enterprise site that doesn't struggle with what's on the client versus what's on the server. And any SEO will tell you anytime you do a large, is almost like a domain migration for our most important directory. Anytime you do a domain migration, it wasn't on the domain level, it was on the directory level for multiple directories. That's not especially easy to do wherever you do that. So I think those were probably the most difficult things, and we worked through them and we're doing great now. But yeah, those definitely were not super easy.
Interesting. Thanks for sharing a bit of insight about your company. That's really cool. So I think that wraps it up. We're out of questions here. So before we go, I wanted to give our audience some more information about Product School, just in case they want to become a product manager. Our product management, product leadership, coding, data analytics, digital marketing, and UX design courses are taught by industry experts working at companies like Google and Facebook. And in addition to that, we offer weekly online and on-site events at our 16 campuses across the US, UK, and Canada. So if you're located near a campus, make sure you stop by on Wednesday or Thursday to one of our events. You can also find us on social media at Product School and keep up with the latest product management content at the product blog at productschool.com. So thank you so much for joining us today, Kenyon. It was a pleasure having you on the channel.
Thanks. It's great to be able to speak again. Looking forward to speaking more. And thanks again.
Yeah, no problem. So see you guys later, and have a great day.